Emmanuel Macron has been re-elected as president of France, winning a second term. Macron seized a convincing victory with 58.5% of the vote, according to provisional results. His opponent, Marine Le Pen, secured 41.5%, the highest outcome yet for the far-right candidate. Sunday's runoff election drew the lowest turnout of voters in more than half a century. Macron recognized that his win was partly thanks to reluctant voters.
A grin not often seen on the French leader. Sunday's vote saw Emmanuel Macron in high spirits after he won 5 more years in office, the first French president in 20 years to be re-elected. But as he claimed victory, he acknowledged that many votes hadn't been cast for him, but against his opponent.
I know that many of our compatriots have voted for me today not to support the ideas that I stand for, but to block those of the extreme right.
As fighting rages in Ukraine, many are relieved that Macron's victory won't mean a change of course. During the campaign, he contrasted his opponent's ties to the Kremlin with his own strong support for arming Ukrainian forces.
We are going through tragic times. The war in Ukraine obliges France to make its choices clear and to build up its strength in all areas. That is something we will continue to do.
Polls had predicted a close race, but in the end, Macron won a comfortable 58% of votes. His far-right opponent, Marine Le Pen, conceded defeat. But buoyed by her strongest ever showing, she said she wasn't going anywhere. This evening, I will say it again, I will never abandon the French people. Long live the Republic, long live France. And as her party looked for what crumbs were left, far-left demonstrators clashed with police in several cities, accusing Macron of being a president for the rich. Emmanuel Macron has pledged to be a president for all French citizens, but it will take more than a smile and a wave to make France's widespread dissatisfaction go away.
I can now bring in our correspondent Sonia Falnica from Paris. Sonia, widespread dissatisfaction there visible as riots break out in several cities. How are other people reacting to the prospect of 5 more years of Macron?
Well, I think that very much depends on who you speak to. I would say generally there is a big sigh of relief here that Macron has gotten this clear victory. That is also reflected in the headlines in many French newspapers today, though many of them are also pointing out that this is a bittersweet victory because many voters didn't vote for Macron. He was not their first choice. They voted rather to keep the far right out of government. We also saw a record low turnout yesterday, the second lowest in more than 50 years. And we've also seen more than 3 million people cast spoiled or blank ballots. And this shows that many people have, rallied around the slogan, neither Macron nor Le Pen. This was a slogan that was coined by students between the 2 rounds. And it shows that many people, simply didn't feel represented by either of the candidates, despite the fundamental differences between the two. So I think all this shows just how utterly divided France is. And Macron will really have his work now cut out to bring this country together.
So Marine Le Pen has lost this vote. Does that mean she's history as a political force in France?
Well, Marine Le Pen's far-right national rally, scored the highest result ever in the history of the party. About 13 million French voters voted for the far-right. And this was largely due to Marine Le Pen. She ran a very slick grassroots campaign, reaching out to working-class voters on the right and left, focusing on the rising cost of living as the key theme, which helped her deflect from her kind of anti-immigration and nationalist agenda. And I think people have credited her with this win. Now, she she's personally said she will not be running again. This was a third bid at the presidency. But her party is certainly eyeing very key parliamentary elections now coming up in France in June that will be held over 2 rounds. And those elections are really key because they will, define the makeup of the lower house of parliament, the National Assembly, determine who runs the next government. And her party, Marine Le Pen's party, has already said, they are planning to kind of capitalize on this widespread anti-establishment anger and really raise their numbers.
Macron has promised to unite the French. Can we expect any changes when it comes to French foreign policy? Very briefly, if you can.
Well, I think the simple answer is we can expect more continuity and stability from Macron on foreign policy. And I think that will come as a big relief to leaders in Europe who were, kind of anxious about the unpredictability and volatility that a Le Pen victory would have meant.
DW's political correspondent in Paris, Sonia Falnica. Thank you, Sonia. And now Nina Hase joins me. Nina, a win for Marine Le Pen would have caused a rift between Paris and Berlin. The government of Olaf Scholz must be very relieved at the outcome.
Well, they are indeed, and they're not hiding it. Well, this victory is seen here as a clear commitment to Europe and to the process of European integration. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz wrote that he was, in fact, the first foreign head of government last night to congratulate Emmanuel Macron personally on the phone. Macron and he agreed. Scholz said that Germany and France will continue to work together closely, not least on pressing issues like Russia's war against Ukraine. They also agreed to meet as soon as possible in person. So Emmanuel Macron's first visit abroad might be to Berlin, if not other people are speculating whether the two of them will go together to Kiev. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier also sent his congratulations, stressing Macron's service to democracy in France, but also in Europe. So it's not just the government that is relieved, though. The leader of the opposition Conservative Party, Friedrich Merz, also wrote on Twitter that Macron's victory was a victory for Europe. And so the only voice singing a different tune somewhat in this choir here in Berlin is the so-called Alternative for Germany party, but that is, of course, hardly a surprise. And they are now betting on a change of course in France in 5 years' time.
Now, how can we see cooperation between Berlin and Paris developing?
I think you can't overestimate just how much of a rift the alternative would have caused. So a victory for Marine Le Pen on Sunday would have meant a disaster and a sudden stop to the French-German engine, which is essentially the one that drives much of European positioning on international topics. That was true with former Chancellor Angela Merkel, but also Scholz and Macron would speak to each other before talking to Vladimir Putin from Russia before the invasion, for example, and they have been coordinating very closely on the sanctions package against Russia since, and they still are. So cooperation is also intense when it comes to finding European answers to the climate crisis, for example. But what's also clear is that Berlin will have to do more to help Macron deliver real results to the French people, deliver benefits of the European project. The previous German government was not exactly supportive of Macron's reform ideas for the European project, and the big question is whether Germany will move its position when it comes to the mutualization of debt in the Eurozone, for example.
Nina Hase there. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nina.